Dexter Morgan didn't just fake his death, he quietly pulled one of the most diabolical disappearances in TV history. At first, it doesn't seem that deep. A tragic decision, a sacrifice, maybe even a necessary evil. Something fans have defended for years. But what if I told you Dexter didn't just leave his life behind, he abandoned his son over and over again? And that when you actually line up his choices across the entire series, the picture that forms isn't complicated, it's brutal. Today, we're breaking down how Dexter Morgan became a certified deadbeat dad, why fans ignored it for so long, and how realizing this completely changes the way you see his character. Now, the realization hits the hardest when you rewind back to the end of the original series, because Dexter doesn't just disappear, he bails. The show frames it like this noble, tragic sacrifice. Dexter fakes his death so Hannah and Harrison can live a peaceful life without him dragging his darkness along. And on paper, sure, that sounds heroic, but when you actually look at what he does, not what the show tells you he's doing, it starts to look way less selfless and way more convenient. Dexter doesn't fake his death for a few weeks or even a few months to let things cool down. He ghosts them for nearly a decade. No visits, no messages, no secret check-ins, no money, nothing. Hannah is left to raise Harrison completely alone, on the run, while also dealing with terminal cancer. And Harrison is forced to watch the only parent he has left die right in front of him. That's not protection, that's abandonment with better PR. Fans have pointed this out for years too. One Reddit user summed it up perfectly. If Dexter really loved Harrison, he would have never left them under the care of a goddamn remorseless serial killer. If Dexter really loved Hannah, he wouldn't have saddled her with a child as she was running from the law in another country that doesn't even speak the same language and with no support network. And that's the key Dexter assumes. He assumes Hannah can handle it. He assumes Harrison will be better off. Hell, he assumes distance magically fixes trauma. But here's the uncomfortable part. If Dexter truly cared, disappearing forever wouldn't be the move. Faking your death for a short window, maybe. But 10 years, that's not a plan, that's giving up. The show never once shows Dexter sending money, arranging support, or even confirming they're safe. He stops being a father the moment the going gets tough. And the wildest part is how quickly the show moves on. Hannah is turned into a single mother who later dies to cancer. Harrison grows up angry and alone. And Dexter, he's out there building a new life in a town he seems to enjoy a little too much. It's the most classic deadbeat dad move imaginable. Convincing yourself you're doing the right thing while someone else carries all the consequences. And once you clock that, the next moment hits even harder, because when Harrison finally tracks him down years later and asks the most basic question a kid could ask, "Are you Dexter Morgan?" Dexter doesn't hesitate, he lies straight to his face, which is insane when you really think about it. This is the moment Dexter supposedly sacrificed everything for. The entire justification for faking his death was that Harrison would be better off. You'd think Dexter replayed this scenario in his head for years, wondering if Harrison would hate him, forgive him, or even recognize him. And yet when the moment actually comes, Dexter chooses self-preservation over honesty. And sure, he eventually comes clean and admits he's Harrison's father, but that doesn't erase the fact that his first instinct was to gaslight his own kid. That's not protection, it's just downright fear. Because in those 10 years between the original finale and New Blood, Dexter never once tries to find Harrison, never even checks on Aster or Cody, and never looks back to see what kind of damage he left behind. He waits to be found, and when Harrison does find him, instead of doing the hard work of repairing that damage, Dexter speeds past accountability straight into trauma speedrun mode, which makes the ending even more unhinged. After years of abandonment, lies, and half-truths, Dexter's big solution to fixing things with his son is telling Harrison to kill him.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
And no, I'm not talking metaphorically, I mean literally. He puts the gun in his hands and frames it like some final act of love, as if asking your already messed up kid to pull the trigger on his own father is closure. Fans immediately called this out with one reaction summing it up perfectly. Harrison knew something was wrong with his father as explained in the letter and still tracked him down, only to kill him in the end. Now he's more up than before finding his father. Awesome writing, Clyde. Should have been called Dexter Daddy Issues. And that's the real punchline. Dexter doesn't break the cycle, he deepens it. He leaves Harrison with even more blood, guilt, and unanswered questions than before. And once you realize how easily Dexter ignores Harrison's pain, it becomes impossible not to notice the other two kids he abandoned without a second thought, Aster and Cody. And this is where Dexter's abandonment goes beyond distance and turns into something way colder, emotional absence. Because it's it's not just that Dexter wasn't there, it's that he didn't even try to be there in ways that didn't put him at risk. No birthday cards, no anonymous letters, no burner phone check-ins, no watching from afar. Dexter is a master of surveillance when it comes to stalking strangers, but when it comes to his own kids, suddenly he's hands off. And that contrast is telling. The show wants us to believe Dexter is constantly thinking about Harrison, but thinking about someone isn't the same as showing up for them. Real parents find ways. Dexter finds excuses.
I'm asking you to do this for me.
Sorry, no.
What the f you?
And that's why the "I stayed away for your own good" defense falls apart so fast. Because staying away didn't require him to erase himself completely. That was a choice, a comfortable one. Dexter didn't want reminders. He didn't want complications. He didn't want to sit with guilt or watch the consequences of his actions unfold in real time. So instead, he compartmentalized his kids the same way he compartmentalizes everything else. Out of sight and out of mind. And the scariest part, he's good at it. Dexter builds routines, new identities, new lives, and he doesn't look back unless something forces him to. That's not restraint, that's emotional avoidance perfected, which makes Harrison tracking him down feel less like fate and more like the one variable Dexter never planned for. Because once you accept that Dexter should have stayed connected but chose not to, it reframes everything that comes after it, including how casually he already let 2 other children slip out of his life years earlier. Because even back in the original series, Dexter doesn't just lose them overnight, he slowly fades out of their lives. At first, you can argue it makes sense. After Rita's death, the grandparents stepping in is probably the most stable option. Dexter is barely holding himself together and the kids deserve something resembling normalcy. But that excuse only works temporarily. What actually happens is Dexter stops pushing, he stops checking in, and he stops trying. Aster drifts away, which the show clearly hints leads her down darker paths later in life, struggling with substances and instability. And honestly, could you blame her? Her mother is brutally murdered technically because of Dexter's double life, and the man who was supposed to be her father figure barely seems interested in staying present afterward. And then there's Cody, the one kid who never pulls away. Cody consistently shows affection toward Dexter, openly trusting him, loving him, clearly seeing him as a real dad. It's actually heartbreaking in hindsight. The show gives us those small moments and then quietly lets them die off screen, and fans notice. One comment put it bluntly: the scene where he proposed to Rita was amazing for me because he didn't just propose to her but also to her kids. But after Rita dies, he happily throws them to the side after season 5 taking no part of their lives pretty much. I'm sorry, but that. That's the thing, Dexter chooses fatherhood when it fits the fantasy, and when it makes him feel human. But when the responsibility gets messy, when grief enters the picture, he disappears. Again, is some of this cheap writing? Absolutely. The show isn't great at following through on long-term consequences, and Aster and Cody kind of get ridden into the void. But even with that in mind, the pattern still says a lot about Dexter as a character. He's not meant to be the best dude. He's a serial killer trying to cosplay as a normal man, and fatherhood, real fatherhood, demands consistency, sacrifice, and emotional presence, things Dexter fundamentally struggles with. And that's what makes what comes next even more disturbing, because instead of learning from how badly he failed Aster, Cody, and Harrison, Dexter convinces himself that the problem isn't him, it's that Harrison is broken too, and like Harry once did to him, Dexter decides the only solution to teach his son is to embrace the darkness the right way. There's this subtle but unmistakable relief in Resurrection when Dexter starts seeing signs of violence around Harrison, like it validates everything he's ever told himself about blood, destiny, and the so-called dark passenger. And instead of slowing down, instead of doing the one thing he never had growing up, protecting a kid from being defined by violence, Dexter immediately slips into full Harry mode. He starts trying to bond over killing, framing it like a shared language. Like this is something that could bring them closer, which is insane because even if Harrison were like Dexter, this would still be the worst possible way to handle it. And the show very quickly makes it clear Harrison is not like him. Harrison feels guilt, real guilt. Hell, he even spirals like a normal human being. And yet Dexter is already trying to plant the idea. Even briefly suggesting to a traumatized teenager that murder might be a part of who they are is enough to completely derail a life that was already barely holding together. It's reckless parenting disguised as understanding. Now to be fair, this is also where the writing gets messy. New Blood clearly flirted with the idea of Harrison as Dexter's successor, only for Resurrection to completely backpedal and try to erase that direction. But even if the show changes its mind, line, Dexter's behavior is still canon. He assumes, projects, and molds, just like Harry did to him. And all of this happens while Harrison's life is already moving at warp speed. One fan perfectly summed up how absurd and overwhelming Harrison's experience in New Blood actually was. So this kid shows up, has to be the new guy at school, saves all the cool kids from a school scores the hottest chick in the grade, ODs at a party, becomes wrestling champ, commits murder, and skips town in like 2 weeks. And keep in mind, Dexter looks at that chaos and thinks, yeah, now's a great time to talk about killing. Even if it's short-lived, it's another moment where Dexter centers his worldview over Harrison's well-being. He's not asking what his son needs, he's asking what this means for him. And once you start tracking those decisions, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. When forced to choose between being a father or feeding the dark passenger, Dexter almost always picks being a killer. Rita doesn't just die randomly, she's murdered as a direct consequence of Dexter deciding he needed to learn from Trinity instead of stopping him early. That wasn't fate, that was curiosity winning over responsibility. And it never really changes. Dexter doesn't reinsert himself into Harrison's life when Harrison is struggling, alone, or spiraling. He comes back when Harrison looks like he's doing okay, or when he appears to be stable, functional, and almost successful. It's the same energy as those deadbeat dads who vanish for years and suddenly pop back up once their kid makes the NBA, talking about some "I always believed in you." Dexter waits until he's got his footing again too, an apartment, a routine, access to victims, and only then does he want to play father. And even in the final moments of New Blood, when Harrison points a gun at him, Dexter still frames everything through the lens of the passenger. His logic boils down to, if I live, this continues. If I die, it ends. That's not a father trying to save his son, that's a man trying to clean up his mess in the most narratively neat way possible. Basically saying, if his dark passenger dies, he dies as well. Wow, how nice of you, Dex. And as well, Harrison's trauma is always secondary to Dexter's need for closure. And that's something that's been said even during the original series and season run. He cares about his son and his 2 stepkids, but only peripherally if they don't get in the way of business. He cares about Deb, but he has no problem lying to her repeatedly. And now that he not only has the hots for Hannah, but also is connecting with her emotionally and intellectually, he's willing to risk the well-being of just about everyone else in his life. Bad friend, bad father, bad brother. Not to mention bad employee. The guy's never at work. And that's funny, but it's also kind of the thesis of Dexter Morgan. He does care, just not enough to stop. That's why the deadbeat dad label sticks so hard. Not because Dexter never loved his family, but because love was never enough to outweigh the passenger, or his lust, I guess you could say. And once you accept that, Dexter stops being a tragic hero who failed, and starts looking like the dad who went to get milk and never came back. If you want to dive even deeper into these topics with exclusive videos, guaranteed replies, and your name featured at the end of every upload, you can become a channel member for just $2.99. It helps out a ton and keeps this content going. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want to keep the conversation going, hop into the Discord where we talk about all your favorite shows and media. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.